Go on to our program. We will go on to our program this evening. We'll have the drawing after the program. I think that's the best way to do it. So, and then La Isla after the meeting. Our speaker this evening is from Barrie, Ontario, and he is with FlexRadio, and he has a very interesting presentation about Flex. And so we'll turn the microphone over to Andy Mitchell, Victor Alpha 3 Charlie Whiskey. Thank you for being here, Andy.
Absolutely my pleasure. And thanks to everyone, particularly to Tim, for the invite and the hospitality. I've enjoyed the business part of your meeting, by the way. A few things of interest as you went through them. First off, congratulations, Katie. I think I've seen you twice at Huntsville. Great job. We had the pleasure of having our stand at Huntsville, just immediately behind the Youth on the Air stand, and certainly noticed we had loads of traffic, and probably wasn't just Flex Radio. I think it was what was going on behind us that was of interest. Also, real keen to hear about Tim W3IPA's interest in 10 gigahertz. We've got quite a crowd of 10 gig operators on the north side of Lake Ontario, and I'm encouraged by that. More importantly, maybe, or more personally, I should say, for me, was just the mention of scouts. And I'm just going to bring up some slides here and get underway. Can everyone see this QSL? Are you able to see the QSL card? All right, that is my QSL card. Back when I was, and I noted on the card, I was at the ripe old age of 14. The card was printed at a local print shop in black and white, leaded print, and I took a red felt tip marker and colored in the nose on Sparky there. But I think the story behind this is I've enjoyed this hobby now for 50 years as a licensed amateur. And a couple of years prior to picking up my Canadian ticket, I was invited to participate in Jamboree on the Air. And at the time, I was somewhat reluctant to go. I wasn't really sure what it was all about. And it was just more time in the weekend that I needed to go somewhere else with the Scouts. I went. I had to call my father later on and say, listen, the Scouters taking everyone home, but I'm still here at Mr. Nurnberg's house. And maybe you could slip up and pick me up closer to 9 o'clock. We were supposed to have been wrapped up at 4. So needless to say, there was some interest there. I got home. I decided at that point in time, my current hobby of photography was going to be no longer, and this was something I was going to buckle down on and pursue. So that's a little bit about me. I saw this, actually I received this image of this old QSL card from a friend of mine who had seen it on eBay, interestingly enough. WN2GEX Sam is now a silent key since 2020, but I presume what's happened is the state was cleared out and someone was the recipient of his QSL cards and ultimately decided to put those up on eBay. I think it fetched a princely sum of $7. Many times what I had invested in postage to send it off to Sam originally. All right. This evening, what I'd like to chat a little bit about is Flex Radio and a new, and I would say from a technology perspective, relatively unexplored way of creating high power with a low footprint. Now, I didn't have a chance to really see the number of folks in the audience, but maybe by way of hand, someone could let me know if one who's heard of FlexRadio first. Are there any that haven't?
We got about most of the room here.
Most of the room has. Is anyone in the crowd a current FlexRadio owner or has access to and operates?
We got about 4.
Okay, that helps. Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is just focus a little bit on what FlexRadio is up to in terms of its pursuits. We've been a first in terms of software-defined HF radio, and that goes back about 23 years now. Our founder, K5SDR, Gerald Youngblood, was one of the first to bring to market an HF SDR. And that, for us, the flagship product at the time was the Flex 1500. This was followed by a number of iterations, including the Flex 3000, 5000, and eventually the 6000 series, which was just recently replaced or superseded last year in May at Dayton with the Flex 8000. We've come a long way in these 23 years. We've got a lot to brag about in terms of technical leadership. We were the first manufacturer to come to market with a direct sampling SDR. We were the first commercially available radio with a 10 meg input and GPSDO. We were the first to use VA3CW data standard. And this is particularly important for interacting with the radio remotely. We were the first with an open Ethernet API, allowing third parties to create programs or interact with our radios. We were also the first manufacturer with a waveform plugin API, and that would allow you to use such technologies as D-Star, for example. And I think probably one of the more important evolutions lately has been the availability of remote operation, which we're particularly proud of. We also focus on simplification, and I think one of the most powerful areas of simplification for us was the DAX, or digital audio exchange, which effectively allows you to connect software programs without cables, without COM ports, without audio cards. And with that, of course, comes reduction in RFI and EMI. So DAX allows you to take these applications, run them natively on your PC, and connect them to the radio without having a cable. Another thing we evolved with was the Maestro and M panel. Maestro allows you to operate the radio remotely, so you get the knob and feel, or the knob and display feel without necessarily having a radio in front of you. You can operate remotely from a hotel room, from your back deck, from the comfort of your shack, or even on the couch. Our M panel radios replicate this functionality, but that panel is connected permanently to the front of our smart SDR radios. The simple remote operation is supported by SmartLink. All you need to do is log into SmartLink, and SmartLink, whether you're using your PC, iPad, iPhone, or a Maestro, will find your radio at home or at your friend's place or at the club's place and allow you to connect. We have a large and continuously variable spectrum display, so you can take a shot of the entire band, you can take a shot of the band segment, see a complete pan adapter, see what is currently going on and what has gone on in that space. And we've got a multi-receiver option that's available in the 8600 series, the 6600, the predecessor to the 8600. And that multi-receiver operation allows things like single operator to radio contest environment. It's also handy if you like to do things such as I enjoy, which is constantly listening to 6 meters and at the same time, maybe listening to the net on 75 or chasing some DX on 20. What I'd like to chat about this evening is, I suspect, summarized quite nicely right here, getting to QRO. And if we look at the typical radio that Flex provides today for as an entry-level radio, we've got a Flex 8400. We've got a power supply to go with it. Its RF power capability is 100 watts. Weight, for some reason, isn't showing up on this chart, but it's about 18, 19 pounds. It uses about 350 watts, so let's say arguably draws at peak close to 30 amps DC on your power supply. And if you were using that on, if you were looking at that as far as line current draw, that'd be about 3 amps. And that starts at about $2,400. If you're looking to get a little bit more power, maybe this time we look at a 500 watt amplifier, the tuner. We'll include the radio and the power supply. We've got some comparisons to make. First off, the weight's about 47 pounds now, considerably heavier. A lot of that taken up in the weight of the PA. The input power has dramatically increased. 1,350 watts is consumed to get us 500 watts out. Not terribly efficient, and not terribly efficient because about 850 of those watts are headed out the ventilation ports as heat, something comparable to a hair dryer, or certainly much more than you would use for a toaster. We're drawing about 11.3 amps here on the mains, and the price has gone up to about $7,000. Finally, if we were looking at legal limit, and here I've drawn the comparison of a Flex 8400, we've included a tuner, we've included the Power Genius amplifier, which will give you 1,500 watts. This is about a 76-pound solution. It's consuming 3,300 watts, 1,800 watts of that is released as heat into your shack or wherever you happen to have that amplifier. And you're going to need 240 volts at 13.8 amps. That starts out at about $13,500. So it's quite a journey there in terms of requirements, and those requirements extend from managing the weight, power consumption, and also the bank account. Let's talk a bit about heat for a second. A lot of this technical content has been provided courtesy of our Chief Technology Officer, who is Stephen Hicks. Steve is W5AC. I really appreciate him sharing this with us. So 250 watts DC input gives you a 100 watt HF transceiver, puts 100 watts out the antenna if you're lucky, but the other 150 watts is released again as heat. Your radio is generally just that much better at generating heat than it is RF. Just taking a look at how we manage heat in the Flex 8000 series radios and 6000s as well. A good chunk of the real estate in the chassis is taken up with a heat sink, and that's illustrated here. And just pay particular note to where that heat sink is and about the size of it, because we'll be coming back to that shortly. As I alluded to earlier, amplifiers have traditionally been pretty good at generating heat and a little less good at generating RF. The comparison I made earlier was a household hair dryer, but you've also, if you put an amplifier in your shack, got a nice room heater as well. And heat rejection is probably the key reason for the size, weight, and noise, as well as the cost of an amplifier. Just to give you a sense of how much heat sink is required, we've shown here the RF stage of a PGXL or a Power Genius XL. This is a 2 kilowatt heatsink. Look at the size of that beast. It takes a whole lot to draw away the heat from the LD MOS technology that's been used for this amplifier. If we could put more power into the transceiver, what would we get? Well, we didn't want to have external boxes for power supplies. We didn't want to have an external amplifier. It's been done, and the results for 200 watts or half an S unit are pretty heavy. And just for comparison's sake, here's an FTDX 101MP, weighs in about 36.5 pounds, and more recently the IC 7760, which comes in close to 40 pounds. Both 200 watt radios, both very good radios, but as you're headed on the journey towards high power, this might be a bit of a challenge. Steve included in his presentations, and I've used this here, is what he refers to as funny math or power and S unit comparisons. What we measure as S units are really just changes in power level, and each S unit requires an additional 6 dB of power, or 4 times the power. So the difference between, let's say, 80 and 120 watts of power is about 1.7 dB. That's less than a third of an S unit. And Steve's important comparison here is each S unit costs more than the last to produce. So in this case, 1 milliwatt to 100 milliwatts is 20 dB, or 3 S units. This can be easily accomplished with a $5 part. And I think Tim W3IPA will get this as we talk about 10 gigahertz transceivers and amplifiers. At 100 watts, if you're moving to 10 kilowatts, which is also a 20 dB jump, we need considerably more. It becomes like a $200,000 amplifier. But why is all this important? Why do you need more power? Or why would you want more power? At 100 watts, if we assume that our partner station is able to copy us at S1, that's assuming 171 dB path loss, what would we get if we cranked up the power a little bit? So at S1, we're plus 50 dBm for 100 watts. If we wanted to move up to S2 plus, we could apply 500 watts at plus 57 dBm. And if we wanted to go full legal limit for the extra 5 dBm or 1500 watts, we'd be up to S3. What's important to note here is that just going from S1 to S2, it really was a 500 watt bonus. We're slightly above S2. And if we look at 1500 watts for that additional amount of power, an additional 1000 watts, we're only up to S3 at that point. So the takeaway here is 500 watts is actually a lot more to halfway than on 1500 watts. How we did this in the past, it's a quick example of one way you might put together a 500 watt station. On the bottom is the venerable Flex 6300. It's long since earned its retirement. The KA2 or KAT, pardon me, 500 antenna tuner, and a KPA 500 500 watt PA. And just to let you know, we spent the weekend at Northeast Ham Expo with our friends from Elecraft. We're very close competitors, and we enjoy the social time as well. I'm sure that Eric and Scott wouldn't mind me showing these images. So if we could put all of that into one box, how big would the box be? What would it weigh? Could you carry it? How would we manage the heat? What would it cost? We'll use in this example the Flex 8600, our current our current 2 SCU or 2 receiver unit. And we'll do that through Aurora. This is a product that we announced back in May at Hamvention this year. And what is Aurora? Well, it's, as we see it, the first significant advancement in transmitter technology since the 1970s. It's built on the work of Tony Brock Fisher, K1KP, from Andover, Massachusetts. He produced and documented his work as the Polar Explorer. We met up with Tony at Dayton in 2019 and decided we had a partner to work with. And through that ensuing 5 years, we managed to come up with Aurora. It's a fully SDR HF transceiver, but it's got a 500-watt transmitter. It doesn't require an external amplifier. Although current transmitters are 40 to 60% efficient, Aurora is 80 to 90% efficient. It's important to note that Aurora is not a power amplifier. It can't be used as a standalone amplifier. It needs to be integrated with an exciter to build a transmitter. The design is such that the amplification stage and the exciter are very closely coupled and can't be separated. What is it? We have now a very efficient 500-watt transceiver. Less input power is required, less than half typically, less heat to reject, which means a smaller heat sink. The smaller heat sink equals less weight. Smaller heat sink equals a smaller box. There's less heat generated. And on the military side of our business or government side of our business, this might be referred to as low swap or size, weight, and power. Here's a look at one of the prototypes of the Aurora transmitter. It's really just slightly larger than the existing 100-watt PA. And I'll just remind you that earlier on, I said, remember the heat sink, its size and what it looks like. We've used the same heat sink right here, but it's heat sink to a 500-watt amplifier. Here's a real quick overview, and I'm not going to go into this in any depth. If you'd like further details with regard to the architecture of Aurora's PA, I'm happy to refer you to some documentation afterwards. Just drop a note in chat and I can link you up with that. There are some excellent articles out there. Tony has produced them. You'll see one in QEX a few years back. The technology itself for Class D or the theory behind Class D is well documented back quite a few years. What we have in the Class D architecture here is just to call out that in the DSP, basically we're taking audio in, we're separating this into amplitude and phase. That's a way of expressing polar modulation. We're going to combine them together in a high efficiency Class D PA, and we're going to run them through a low pass filter. The key here is in the separation of amplitude and phase from the audio in signal, and that allows us to drive the power amplifier very efficiently. Let's take a look at the comparison again. So I mentioned that we've got considerable improvements in size, weight, and power. So here on the left, we have a 500-watt PA, a tuner, and also the 8600 and a power supply. It adds up to about 47 pounds. It is about 11.3 amps and draw from the mains and costs about $9,000. If we looked at the Aurora, here we've got 500 watts, but we've only got 18 pounds of weight. And we're drawing about 5.4 amps for 500 watts. It starts at $61.99. I think the thing that impresses me the most about Aurora is the fact that all of that sits in the same box, the same chassis as our traditional 6600 and 8600 products. But it weighs only 18 pounds, which means you can take this as carry-on luggage on an airline. Just reiterating here, we consume 625 watts of power. Only 125 of that is heat. The other 500 is going up the antenna. We've got the same small package. We've got 18 pounds in weight, and it makes for a lot lighter experience if you're a POTA operator, if you're taking it to a summer home or a vacation destination, the expedition. We'll cover that a little bit later. And more importantly, it costs less than buying all those components together. One of the things we did at Dayton, and we've repeated at Huntsville, we've repeated it also at Northeast Ham Expo this past weekend, is the brick on key. This is a pretty dramatic demonstration. What we did was we powered up the Aurora to 500 watts. We put a brick on the key and literally transmitted for 2 hours before we did this test. And this one was conducted in our lab, by the way. After 2 hours, we took the thermal imager. The radio is at 37 degrees C and was cool to the touch. And the dummy load, which you can see in the background there, was up to 91 C. That was pretty impressive, but more impressive for me was the fact that we did this test from opening to close 3 days in a row at Dayton. We did the same thing at Friedrichshafen in Germany and at the other events that we've been at. More recently this weekend, we ran it, and I think we got the heat sink up to 100 degrees C. The air conditioning was nice at Marlborough, and it was such that we only saw about 31 degrees C on the case. Keep in mind that inside the chassis is the power supply as well. So that's pretty impressive. Again, as I mentioned, the Aurora is a transceiver. It's not an amplifier. We can't use it for an amplifier with other exciters. It's got to be tightly coupled into to the transmitter. That will not be offered as an amplifier for third-party exciters, although you could conceivably use it as an exciter for an amplifier. However, there are some cautions there. You don't want to inadvertently apply 500 watts to an external amplifier from your Aurora. It'll certainly cause damage to the amplifier and could possibly damage the Aurora as well. It's got a wide range of power supply capability, so it'll run from 80 to 264 volts AC. Means you can take it to Japan, you can put it on 240 volts, you can put it on an inverter style generator at a POTA site. The radio does have a 500 watt internal ATU. We've got that in there because the power fold back on the Aurora begins at 1.7 to 1. The ATU will support, as typical internal ATUs do in transceivers, up to a 3 to 1 SWR. Here's a quick look at the models. We have 4 models in total. We have the single SCU, and I'll just pause here on SCU for a second. Spectral capture unit. You could imagine that as being a single receiver dedicated to a single antenna. That'll allow you to take a look at with 2 VFOs any different band that you might be of interest or you might have of interest on a single antenna. Let's say you have a wire antenna and you're capable of transmitting or receiving, more importantly, from 80 through 10 meters. You could put that single receiver up. You can open 2 VFOs. You can listen to 40 meters at the same time. You're listening to 20. With a 2 SCU unit, the AU520, you have 2 separate SCUs or 2 separate receivers. You have the capability of having up to 4 slices or 4 VFOs up simultaneously. But key here is the ability to have one receiver dedicated on one antenna, the second receiver dedicated to another antenna. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier. That's something that's of interest to me. I like to have 6 meters on 7x24, and I've got antenna 2 dedicated to that, or SCU2 dedicated to that task. The rest of my daily DX and listening on the nets is on antenna 1. We've also got M panel versions of this. So we discussed earlier that Maestro is the knob and display manifestation of the radio, and that's available on the front panel of both the AU510 and AU520 as an M model. And also you could add to that if you wanted a Maestro to stand alone, or a PC, or iPad, etc. These are all 500-watt radios. They come with an internal ATU, it's not optional, and a GNSS GPSDO. The GNSS GPSDO is handy for not only calibrating the radio to be on frequency. If you enjoy doing the ARRL frequency measuring test, this might be something you want to try out. It's also useful if you want to have a network time server. And where would you use that? Maybe you're on a DXpedition, you don't have access to the internet. You will have access to accurate time, because if you have a PC there, for example, you're running FT8, you need to timestamp stuff, you need to be in sequence, you can obtain that information, that time information, directly from the radio. Let's talk a little bit about use cases. Small footprint, big convenience. So if you need to simplify your shack, you've got a limited amount of space, this is a great way to do it. You don't need 240 volts to operate the Aurora. You can operate this from 120 volts AC. It draws only 5 amps, so no special circuit is required. It's a modest station, but with 500 watts, it also, I think, keen for me is eliminating cables and cleans up the station look. I heard POTA mentioned earlier. OzPOTA, Ohio State Parks on the Air. Here's a great idea. Could operate the Aurora as a POTA station. Real light, makes things easy to set up and tear down. Doesn't consume much power at all. So if you're using one of the, for example, the Honda, I think they're EU2000 inverter generators, this could be an approach. Less generator power required, less fuel consumed, less noise. One of the things I like about this possibility as well is you could locate the transceiver closer to the antenna and the generator, and then operate from a tent or picnic table some distance away from it, maybe sheltered. And Tim, K3LR, let's talk about DXpeditions. This is a great opportunity. If you're looking for Scarborough Reef, maybe next time we see Scarborough Reef, there'll be an Aurora there. It makes things much easier to transport, as we mentioned earlier, because it's conceivably a carry-on weight, and it takes less effort to set up and tear down. You can, again, run it on a pretty simple generator. I think the other piece that's important here is you can certainly spend more on snacks and beverages to sit at the DXpedition than you need to on infrastructure. Remote use case, this is the entire station in a box. You don't need 12-volt power supply. You don't need an AC switching power supply for an external amplifier. And it's a relatively low investment cost. Some of the things that Aurora is not going to support, and this is important to keep in mind, it is not capable of MARS operation or shares operation. The radio has been developed specifically for amateur allocations. making modifications to allow it to operate outside of these bands is not possible. And in fact, if we had that as a design philosophy, the outcome would be considerably different in terms of the weight and the size and configuration. I mentioned earlier that you could conceivably drive an amplifier with it. It's not recommended. 500 watts will most surely destroy any amplifier input circuit. It may cause damage to the Aurora as well. And that's it. Aurora is one of these movie posters, and it is one giant leap for hamkind. And if you are interested in an Aurora poster, we've got a few left. You can drop me a note. We signed some of these at Dayton, and that was, I guess, our producer and director, Tony Brock Fisher's effort. So, want to applaud Tony and the entire Flex engineering and operations team who made this possible. And with that, I will pause in the event that you might have some questions.
Thank you, Andy. That it's spectacular, new technology, and we're able to see it here at the Mercer County Amateur Radio Club. You want to go ahead and bring up the lights, Corey? Does anybody have any questions for Andy? Oh, you never have questions. The gentleman in the back row.
Okay, first of all, this fancy radio, what happens if you screw up in the program? Is there a switch you can make it go back to original factory settings?
There is no need for a switch. It's actually point and click, and you'll be reset to factory settings.
Good enough. Second, if the heat sinks are 212 degrees, how hot is it inside?
How hot is it inside? Less than, and 212 degrees is a heat sink, by the way, on the dummy load. So that's 500 watts into that bird tourmaline.
Oh, it was a dummy load that got up to boiling. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, and you said 500 watts, 5 amps at 115 volts.
That's right. We measured the power consumption there, and also dialed the radio back to 100 watts when we were at Huntsville. And my colleague Mike Walker and I took a look at that. We concluded pretty quickly that at 100 watts, that radio drew less than a laptop power supply did.
So at 100 watts output RF, you were drawing what? How much AC power?
We're drawing just a little over 1.8 amps there.
It's pretty. Okay, now I got the impression the finals, which we call them finals, are some pretty new technology.
That's correct. I can't share with you what that technology is. What I can tell you is it's not LDMOS.
Okay, all right, that's good. And what kind of a warranty?
The Aurora radios come with a 2-year bumper-to-bumper warranty.
You know, because believe me, I can screw up anything.
And well, Dave, you better break the piggy bank for this one. Back to Corey there. Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Class D, which is what is the secret sauce here for efficiency, has been used, in broadcast technology for a long time.
That's correct.
So, but you guys are the first guys to actually bring this out of the experimenter area. There's been Class D articles in QEX and other places, but you guys now bring it commercially and efficiently and at a price that some hams can afford.
That's right, Tim. I mean, if we look at Class D technology, it's not particularly new. It has been around for a while, but what makes Aurora unique is first taking and leveraging Class D technology, polar modulation, but more importantly, integrating it with a fully SDR transceiver, so direct
Right.
SDR, and it makes it affordable. It makes it it makes it light. It makes it doable, and I think that's where the innovation lies.
Yes. Any other questions for Andy? Well, Andy, it's been great to have you on Zoom. We hope you're feeling better, and we do invite you to come and visit us in person at some future date. Flex and DX Engineering are working very close, and whenever I can leverage a visit from a vendor such as Flex, Andy was scheduled to be at DX Engineering tomorrow. I like to leverage it so that it coincides with a MCARC meeting. And but Zoom is the next best thing to being here. And Andy, we'll give you a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Tim, and all of you who are members and guests of Mercer County ARC. I enjoyed joining you this evening, and I'm really honored that I had that opportunity. I do wish I could have been there in person, but it would have been an eventful trip down, I'm afraid. And I look forward to Tim visiting K3LR, getting to the upcoming club meeting, and getting over to see your team over at DX Engineering.
I guess Barney. Oh, there we are. We're back. Okay. Thanks very much, Andy, and we wish you 73.
My pleasure. 7-3 all. Be well.
Good night.
All right. Yeah. Keep